Well, hi there. You're watching watching and or listening. Podcast is Broken, a weekly Canadian podcast where we try to make Canadian news and politics more jape rich. My name is
Where do you
Brittlestar.
say your name?
Sorry, I forgot that part. Damn it. My name is Brittlestar.
I'm Steve Boots, and I think we make it more jocular.
Shut up, Steve. My name is Lisa, and we like to make it zesty.
Oh, I like zesty. That's good.
Right?
I also like this. The title of this episode is Shut Up, Steve. I like that.
Yeah, shut up, Steve.
I like that.
That's the theme this week?
Yeah, exactly. How are you guys doing? You guys doing all right?
I'm doing well, except for I've just learned of the theme, and I'm not a fan.
That's why I like to keep the content a secret until you're online and ready to go.
Surprise!
And I've made a bunch of notes, and so has Lisa, about the reasons that
Yes.
you should shut up. That's
We actually met earlier without you here.
a lot of
This is more of an intervention sort of situation.
met with some people on
yes.
TikTok, and they all have the same advice for us. I tease. Of course,
We
we
tease
love
'cause
Steve.
we love.
Exactly,
We
we love
love.
Steve. We're going to talk about something that kind of freaks me out a little bit. So this happened in your province, Lisa. So I'm kind of blaming you a
Big
little
sigh.
bit.
Big sigh, yeah.
But Premier Daniel
Things are going
Smith
great.
announced plans to transfer some of Alberta's hospitals from the AHS, the Alberta Health Services, to operators such as Covenant Health. And she stated, quote, "We're going to take," implied, "the hospital back if AHS isn't delivering the required services." So the idea is the Alberta government's going to keep the ownership of the hospitals and may lease them to AHS or other operators, which includes Covenant Health. Premier said, quote, "The next phase is to see how many of those hospitals that AHS currently operates that we can retake ownership over." This is kind of freaking me out a little bit. It's a very weird way to phrase things. It's a weird way to do things. I don't like the idea. But nevertheless, I'll go on to further. So the hospital in La Crete, is that correct? Am I saying that correctly?
Yep.
Is already being transitioned to Covenant Health. And the Premier said Covenant Health has never closed down rural hospitals. It may well be that we just need different operators in the smaller communities. She said there'll be changes will be happening slowly, and the government will seek approval from the Alberta populace to proceed. So what do we think about this? I mean, like I said, it freaks me out. Steve, do you love it? Why do you love it, Steve?
Oh,
Shut up, Steve.
You will not believe what a fan I am of this plan.
I can imagine.
It's going to fix. I mean, she did promise to fix healthcare in 90 days, and we're, midway through year 2-ish?
Is that less than 90 days?
She never said 90 consecutive days.
Oh, it's just been 90 days.
Mathematician,
It's like 90 business days, like when you're waiting on something from Temu. Exactly.
A year and a half later.
It's the AliExpress version of 90 days.
Mm-hmm.
It's beyond horrible for a million reasons. But I think the thing that, I feel like it's pretty easy to look at it and just feel like it's an intuitively bad idea.
Yeah.
But the thing that's sending huge alarm bells off with me is it's a very sneaky path to privatization, because what they're going to do is hold this like a big sword of Damocles over top of the AHS and say, shape up or we're going to take your hospital away. There will be no possible way for them to shape up as it's demanded. They're going to be set up to fail. We all see it coming a million miles away. And they're just going to wind up becoming leaseholders for these private healthcare companies that are going to run the hospitals. So they're not going to technically privatize healthcare. They're just going to create a situation where the only path is for healthcare to be privatized.
Yeah. And
I sit here just vibrating, though.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot. The issue that I have is, and what I've always said about Danielle Smith is you need to read between the lines of what it is that she's putting out there. So she had said, if the operator is not performing, then we will move it to places like Covenant Health or others. We have no others. We have no others in the province. So it would be Covenant Health or ... But she also spoke to how competition is healthy.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be a competition in healthcare, period.
Yeah.
So those are the things that you need to break down in what she's saying. That The problem isn't the name on the door. The problem is we've got workforce issues, right? And she's had this vilification of Alberta Health Services. Why, we don't know. I don't know why necessarily she's, they fired the board, they changed, the head of AHS. Like, I don't know why this is their, well, I do know why. She's going into a leadership review. She's doing a lot of stuff, but yeah, it's terrifying. It's
So
terrifying.
the idea is that you're thinking that she's going to this leadership review and this is why she's doing stuff like this is because there's people that are going to be reviewing her leadership that are connected to places like Covenant Health that are going to make money.
Well, I mean, look, we've had for a long time now rural hospitals, emergency departments that have just had to shut down because of a variety of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Services have been reduced in those areas. And I think when you're looking at a leadership review, primarily there's a lot of rural Albertans that would be voting on her leadership review. So I think that's part of it. I mean, she's doing a bunch of other wackadoo things outside of healthcare also. And it just seems to be this like massive push. I don't know if it's because they're gearing up to go back into session. I don't know if it's because of that leadership review. Again, these are just my opinions. I don't know anything. But she's certainly targeting the rural Albertans who may not have had access to hospital.
Right.
The reality is that some of the things that she said, Covenant Health has never shut down a hospital. Yeah, they have.
Right.
The emergency departments in rural Alberta have also shut down.
Right.
So, and that's because it's a workforce issue. It's not a managing issue.
There's that, and there's also, I think, another part to Danielle Smith's strategy here, and the reason why she's doing this right now in the wake of or in the setup to a leadership review, because like the leadership review is not it's from the membership as much as anything, and so not all of them are like business connected to Covenant or private healthcare, whatever. So a big part of what she's also catering to is this really underlying sort of dogmatic assumption that's really common everywhere, but it's incredibly common in Alberta and Saskatchewan, of government bad, private industry good.
Right.
By default, if the government does it, it's bad. So if we can make it not the government, make it private industry, good. And they can never really explain why without a bunch of assumptions about how terrible the government is by default, that they never, ever apply to private business. But
well, there's one thing, and I'm going to shock myself here by saying this, but I do agree with her on one thing. And I'll tell you that was the quote of her saying, when you're dealing with a monopoly, there are no consequences. They're going to continue to deliver bad service. Then she loses me. I'm with her there. The fear of having it taken away is going to be a very powerful competitive incentive. Now, that makes sense, I think, for a restaurant, a shop, or something like that. However, it's kind of like with the healthcare system. It's kind of like the government is the only customer giving them money. If they stop paying them and keep demanding more service, they're just not going to get it. Eventually, you're not going to get your fries because there's no money to pay for your fries. I don't know why I related to that to fries, but I did. But it reminded me of the problem of when governments run things. And I'm a huge supporter of public health care. I want the government to run it. I want it to be amazing. I think it could be as good as we could possibly want it to be. If we want it to be amazing healthcare service, we can do that because we're the public and we're running it. Let's do it. However, there's lots of examples of government-run stuff that gets bloated on the top end and the money never makes it down into the nitty-gritty and the day-to-day and all that kind of stuff. And the most simple, and that's usually as a result of greed and humans being morons, basically.
So if you're watching on video, you just saw me look like delighted to explain this a little bit.
So the example that comes to mind for me, and this is not a big example or an important example, however, here in Stratford, in sunny Stratford, Ontario, there was a main post office downtown. And the post office back in the 80s was like a bustling bit of activity, obviously, because it was the biggest game in town as far as getting messages and stuff to people. And there was much like going into an old style bank. There was just like a row of wickets that you could go up to and you could get all your banking stuff taken care of and you get all your postal stuff rather taken care of and all that kind of thing. However, the workers at the post office started to get less and less service oriented. And there was like, for whatever reason, they started not caring about the job. It became a less pleasant experience going to the post office. So people stopped going to the post office. Invariably, what happened is that around that time, they said, well, that's it. We're going to just put this post office to the satellite offices instead now. Now there's going to be satellite post offices instead. And I'm positive that was connected to two things. One is probably a reduce in morale / payment / working conditions. And the other is that idea of like, what are you going to do? Fire me? We're the only post office. We're the post office. What are you going to do? So I kind of understand that idea where it's like the government doesn't have the greatest track record of running stuff. But at the same time, when it comes to healthcare, I think I'd rather the government ran it.
Permission to get a little bit into the weeds?
Yes.
Allowed. And
hang on, let's get ready. Let's practice. Shut up, Steve. Shut up, Steve. Yeah, okay, that sounds good. We're ready.
Okay, so for starters, you know that there's always a built-in inefficiency in a private system because of the profit incentive.
Absolutely.
Somebody is taking money off the top.
Sure.
We don't really need to get into the weeds on that. There's money being paid that isn't being put back into the business.
Yeah.
It's going to some dude on a yacht. Okay, so
are you saying that
in the
because I was on
public
a yacht
system,
last week?
obviously.
Obviously, it could have
So
been true.
in a public system, where does the inefficiency come from?
Unions.
Oh, do not.
But I mean, kind of.
Get on a plane
But
right
go
now.
on. Let's just pretend I never said that. But go on.
Oh my God.
So realistically, I'm talking about workers. Where at the level of the org chart is the inefficiency centered?
I know.
I think
Lisa,
this is gonna-
please.
No, I think Stuart should have to answer.
No, I'm not going to answer.
Because I
I'm here
know.
to learn.
The middle. The middle
Yeah.
is the problem.
There's a managerial level
Right.
where the problem lies. And it's not that, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm villainizing individual managers here. It's not that. Like, they're just people going to work and doing their jobs.
Mhm.
But I think there's people listening here who know that these email jobs exist to shuffle papers and all this stuff. So why do those jobs come into being?
I already answered a question. It's up to you.
Well, I'm going to guess that they come into being because people have to advance and there's nowhere to advance because they're not going to advance to the top levels.
Not as much as you'd think. So most frontline workers don't really want to leave the front line. The only reason why they wind up leaving the front line is because that's the only way to grow their salary, improve their hours,
Sure.
whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So what winds up happening is you have issues in every public system because they're huge, complex systems. And so you get these elections run where the people running say, we're going to fix the system. We're going to bring in the magic word, accountability.
Right.
That'll magically fix everything. And so in order to hold those lazy frontline workers, who are obviously the problem, accountable, how do you get them to work harder? You add a managerial layer to literally just stand behind them and say, work harder, work harder. And what a coincidence, they don't always need to be qualified. So you can put people you know in there. Your buddy Tom, who you fish with on Thursdays, you can put him in one of those spots. It's great. And so this managerial level gets built, and then everybody says, well, the system doesn't work. As they're standing there saying, we're going to add more accountability, further breaking it. And the people on the front lines are literally saying, like, please, sir, can I have some funding? And they're like, we are going to fill out a form with the VP of funding requests. He's going to take it to the funding request board. They meet 3 times monthly. They make $30,000 a year. Right? Like, this is like, there's just layers and layers and layers on this. And so the public system gets vilified as being tremendously inefficient by the very people who broke it and are selling you a solution.
But I mean, that's just the point, though, isn't it? It's just the bureaucracy of it all. That's what makes everything slow and inefficient. And I'm not saying, and again, I want to clarify my position on healthcare specifically, but on a lot of stuff is I don't want it to be privatized because exactly your first point is completely right. The biggest issue with privatization is that there's a push for profits. That's what the driving force behind every single private enterprise is profit. And However, that said, though, that's exactly that's the view of people who are thinking, well, yeah, we should just let Covenant take over whoever. There's this notion that, as you said, private is somehow better because it's not as bloated with bureaucracy, as it were.
Okay, so I want to make a correction. Covenant is not private. Covenant is publicly funded in Alberta.
Right.
The charting basically is like Alberta Health Services. Covenant is a subsidiary of Alberta Health Services. So they get their funding from Alberta Health Services, who gets their funding from Alberta Health. The problem is that the structures are the same. They still have echelons of management. They still have a board. They still have, like, it's the same. It's just on a smaller scale to what AHS is. So like, there's nothing nouveau about what Covenant looks like. So that's the question that I have is why? Well, just to create this competition in healthcare?
There's that, but there's also the question of the problem is a lack of frontline workers.
Mm-hmm.
How is a different set of people sitting in the boardroom going to fix any of that?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you talk to people who work at Covenant, they're dealing with the same issues of working short.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like that is not
from the
different.
Same pool of workers.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I will clarify for Covenant, because Covenant, of course, is not private in the sense that it's not like you don't whip out your MasterCard to pay for your broken arm. You don't do that. Still paid by AHS. But it's private owned and not for profit. So it still has a desire to do, at least on books, do well enough. Slightly different from just a government funded type of thing. But again, similar to a doctor in Ontario, which is a private enterprise, as it were, but paid for by the government. So that idea.
Yeah.
Now, the thing with the Covenant, which I was fascinated by Covenant, I was looking this up today. And so the board of Covenant is a not-for-profit. And I have had some experience with not-for-profits, and they do all right. They do okay. There's no shortage of cash there. They're not sort of sitting all piously like monks saying, we don't need money. We're not for profit. Take your profit elsewhere.
Not non-profit and not for profit are different.
Yeah.
Because a not for profit can be like, whoopsies, profit.
We made money. Sorry.
Exactly.
My goodness, what a shame.
Exactly. But of course, the board apparently has been chaired by former Alberta Premier Ed Stelmach since 2016. So it sounds like there's, even though it's not a consumer paying service, there's still people who are benefiting tremendously from this.
Oh, yes. And if you scroll down that board page just a touch further, you will find former Justice Minister Tyler Shandro as well.
Yeah, which I saw actually today on Lisa's video. So thank you, Lisa.
And you're welcome. And the question arises as to who was the premier when Covenant Health was established in the province.
I don't know, but it was in 2000.
Interesting question.
2008.
Who's the board chair right now?
Ed Stelmach.
Ding, ding, ding.
Oh, my God. This is what concerns me about this. I mean, I have lots of concerns about Covenant Health, but this is what freaks me out about the idea that the government of Alberta is going to start stealing hospitals back from AHS and parachuting in this other corporation, which, despite whatever status it is, there's people who are benefiting tremendously by that move. And that's a thin edge of the wedge. Surely that to me strikes me as like, this is how we start. And then if you want to get premium services, well, maybe you can pay a little extra. Maybe it's patient plus.
I'm gonna say something that may be an unpopular opinion, because I know everybody's up in arms, and certainly everybody's up in arms. You know, we're pushing faith-based medicine, which absolutely, that's not new. Faith-based medicine is not a new thing. I was a kid and had my tonsils taken out or my adenoids taken out at the Jewish General in Montreal. So like faith-based hospitals have existed for a really long time. The problem that exists with this, and there's times for different arguments because I don't want to get into the weeds with it. There's problematic historical issues with what is now Covenant, the Misericordia Sisters, its relation to residential schools, where the hospitals are located, all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
That is problematic in and of itself. And putting that out into rural communities who are also near Indigenous populations where you're only giving them a choice to go to a Catholic hospital is problematic in and of itself.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I'm not arguing that point. My argument to all of this is not to vilify Covenant Health as like they've done something wrong. I don't know that they've done something wrong. I think this government is pitting two healthcare providers now against each other in the province to get the spotlight off of them. Because this whole vilification of Alberta Health Services and they're top heavy and then this and they're that, sure. But when they were created, again, with Mr. Stelmach, the whole point was to create the monopoly.
Right.
Because we had all these little regional authorities that dealt with things all differently. There was no accountability. And so the point was to streamline processes so that everybody was on the same page, under the same mission, values, ethics, all that kind of stuff. And for the most part, it worked. We had a very recognized healthcare system in Alberta for a long time because you could go to this hospital and then you're going over here, but you're getting the treatments. Like there was no breakage of service. There was continuity of care. This creation now of we're going to take it from big bad AHS and we're going to start breaking things off. Well, she did it with the 4 streams to begin with, and that was just the beginning of it. But to say we're going to take it from AHS and we're going to give it to Covenant because Covenant is somehow better is a misnomer. Like healthcare, hospitals, healthcare in Alberta is bad regardless of where you're working, whether it's public, private, for profit, like it's all bad. But this now creates this whirlwind of people to talk about that takes the pressure off the government, who has had no answers on how to fix healthcare. And my worry is for the frontline healthcare workers, whether that's, nursing care or doctors or support services, like they're the ones that now have increased instability of where the hell am I going to be working and who's my paycheck coming from now? We need to talk about the impact it will have with unions and who now have to negotiate potentially different collective agreements for people who are being transferred out of Alberta Health Services into. There's so many things wrong, but even us discussing it in the whirlwind that I've been in the last day and a bit, this is what the government wants, right? Roll it around in your head, figure it out. We're just going to be over here making other shitty decisions that you're not going to know about till we announce them.
Yeah, they just drop it and wander away.
Right? Yeah. Boop. So, yeah, there's, again, I don't want to get into an AHS versus Covenant. My worry in all of this is that Alberta Health Services oversaw everything, like anything medical that had to do, right? They also provide funding to our 2 publicly funded long-term continuing care organizations in the province. This province is big on privatizing for profit. And my worry, if she's just picking this out of AHS and throwing it over here and picking this over there, is that she's going to disseminate the 2 public long-term care facilities. That is my biggest worry with the way that she's just saying, we're going to take it away and we're going to take back, which is a interesting terminology for her to use.
Yeah, who's taken it? Out of curiosity.
Yeah, exactly. That's my worry because it's snippets of what's going to lead to privatization, period. Whether it's Covenant or whatever they're dealing with, but that's my worry.
Yeah,
I can rant on and on.
No. And I mean, I'm not after the. I don't have an issue with the nurses and doctors and such of Covenant Health because I'm sure they're doing what they do, and that's great. What I have a problem with Covenant Health is a couple things. One is the fact that there's people who are standing to gain, there's obviously conflict of interest almost, where it's like you're going to make tremendous amounts of money because of this decision. And especially when you've got the premier saying things like, well, it'll go to Covenant Health or someone else. It's right. Like, well, who else?
Or whoever
yeah, exactly.
It may be.
We don't know yet.
And then that leads I find faith-based healthcare hilarious to me, and especially growing up in a small town where we just have a general hospital. That's it. I'm sure there's lots of bias in the hospital. I'm sure there's lots of leaning to, whatever Christian as it were as such, but it's generally just healthcare. And the problem I have with the Covenant Health taking over some of the hospitals is that that's fine if they are going to take over and do a great job, and that's great. But if they are not going to perform MAID, abortions, not going to be big on contraception, not going to help with IVF and surrogacy, but you're going to ship to somewhere else. Oh, but there's no other hospital to ship you to. So you're going to have to go to Manitoba. You're going to have to go to Saskatchewan.
So we didn't technically ban it.
Yeah.
There's just no legitimately possible way to get it.
And I'm not even sure that's part of the plan. I'm saying it's a malicious part of the plan. However, I am saying it keeps any blood off their hands. It's a terrible analogy.
Oh, geez.
Any dirt off their hands. And they don't have to do it.
Can I say that it was malicious intent?
You can say that. Yeah.
I'll quite gladly say
that.
Yeah. It's an interesting when you have, more religious-based voters in rural areas, and now you're introducing faith-based hospitals that would restrict the things that the religious voters in rural areas aren't interested in, right? They don't want to deal with things like contraception or abortion or any type of reproductive rights, and certainly MAID. We've seen that. It's happened where you have somebody in palliative that is making the decision. They will come and counsel you on it.
Right.
But at the end of the day, they're going to say, okay, if that's what you want,
get in the
we're going
ambulance.
to have to move
we're
you
taking
here.
you somewhere else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which, can you imagine?
No, that'd be horrible. So terrible.
But there's option. So as long as there's option, doesn't matter how far away the option is, I guess. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So if someone's in Lacrete and wants to have this done, but all the rural hospitals between Lacrete, which is a northern point in Alberta, if all the rules are Covenant Health, you're driving to Edmonton. That's a 9-hour drive. Palliative.
I also think there's a larger conversation to be had about the role that the Catholic Church plays in public institutions in Canada. Right? Like,
oh, dear Lord. Yes. Yeah.
No, it's like, it's because you're talking about your secular experience in a hospital. I went to public schools my whole life, and I did a pre-internship for 3 weeks in a Catholic school.
Right.
And they started a staff meeting with a prayer.
Yep.
And I was immediately like,
whoa.
Oh, this is way different. And like, I'm not pro, I'm not against, I'm not particularly interested in religiosity. That's not somewhere where I spend my time. And so for me, sitting there is like, this is very alienating, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's lots of people who aren't even necessarily offended by it, as just like, it feels almost out of place to them. I was just kind of Googling while we were talking here. There's only one province left that is majority Catholic. Only Quebec is 53.8%. But like,
and they're the fun Catholics.
Alberta isn't even majority Christian anymore. It's 48% Christian.
Wow.
But there's a history. Like there's a Catholic history.
Yeah, for sure.
In Alberta, right?
And
there's political influence.
Well, of course. I mean, I'm Catholic, non-practicing. I went to a Catholic school. We did prayer in the morning. I've been to some places that are, secular in nature. And yeah, they do start off with a prayer. I mean, you learn to ignore it.
Yeah.
But they do start off with the prayer. And what's to say is like, for all the things that Covenant does, whether it's hospitals or long-term care, they don't just help the Catholics, right?
No, of course not. Of course not.
But that's what is imposed in a Catholic hospital or center, right?
I did really enjoy when I was looking at, I literally was looking at Covenant Health and I was like, Catholic healthcare provider. What the hell is Catholic healthcare? And I did a little reading on that. And my favorite line of description is Jesus Christ, who the church holds as its founder, which I guess is the original CEO, which I think is really funny to me.
I mean, they got his picture up on the wall in every office.
I guess so. Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. But then I thought, wait a minute, the Catholics, I thought they were really with Jesus. I thought they were with more thing about Mary.
Why do I get the feeling that this week we're going to see the greatest fake undercover boss video from you?
Oh my God. Don't. That's beautiful.
Just an awful wig.
Oh my God.
Hang on, I gotta write that down. Write
that down.
Oh wow, so your boss is a real jerk, eh?
Buy beard and wig and sandals with tie.
And cross, because we do like Jesus on the cross. Catholics do love Mary. We do love Mary. We're sort of like pre. We don't care what happened after. We just up to that.
But you give him the keys to the hospital. You let him, I guess you got to give him something to do. That's the idea.
He's everywhere.
Yeah.
So-
He's everywhere.
Right.
I will say one thing that I worry about a lot in this sort of situation is there are a lot of sort of accommodations and adaptations to make spaces more comfortable, more welcoming. And what becomes of those? Like, what becomes of prayer rooms? What becomes of foot washing stations? What becomes of all of those different things that got added into public spaces
Mhm.
to make them more welcoming for different faiths?
I mean, that's
But we still have human rights. We still have human rights.
But if
we
it's a
still have
Catholic
protected
facility, they don't
and
need
it's
to
a
meet
and it's a
non-Catholic
tech. I guess it's.
needs.
I mean, I guess it'd be considered not a private building, obviously, 'cause it's still owned by AHS.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's
they,
Well,
still
and this is where
public.
it gets messy.
Yeah.
Like, where do conscience rights begin? And
Well, they have
Peop-
a list of what the do's and don'ts, right? Like they have things that they won't look at. Like they will not assist with, like, when we're talking about reproduction, they won't assist with surrogacy. They won't
Yeah.
assist with IVF. They don't assist with so anything, the fetus is a baby at conception, like all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
But that's in their practice, like in their medical practice.
have
Whether-
they got anything in there about gender affirming care?
This is the ironic part, is that when you do, sorry, I'm going to have to pull it up. When you do the history of like one of the hospitals that is under Covenant Health, it was the first gender reassignment program in Canada was established at the Grey Nuns Hospital, which, by the way, is the last hospital built in Edmonton in 1988.
Right.
And so at that point in time, it was a Catholic, because it was a different organization overseeing them before Covenant came around. But they had that program. I have tried to look, and I don't think that exists anymore there.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah.
And like,
yeah.
this is the thing. I'm not necessarily against having religious hospitals, like having, a Jewish hospital or a Catholic hospital, or whatever. But once it becomes the primary option
Mhm.
or the only option,
The only option.
that's when it becomes the issue, right?
Here's another thing I found today that was interesting. An article from 2020 about it was from the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees, and it was a little loaded in language and in slight an angle. But however, the takeaway was essentially that accusing Jason Kenney of scheming with Covenant Health to sell off hospital services. So these guys this whole thing's, to me, reading that was like, oh, that's only 4 years ago, but also it's 4 years ago. So this has been a long-term plan. This isn't like, hey guys, I got a great idea. It wasn't Daniel Smith saying, I've got a great idea. This will really help things. It sounds like there's been lots of groundwork laying to make
They
this
play
happen.
this game all the time.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but it's not unusual. I mean, conservative governments have always had negative impacts on healthcare,
Yeah.
right? We had Ralph Klein, who basically said, we don't need nurses, and got rid of a whole bunch of nurses. And then we're like, oh shit, we need nurses. It's not unusual,
Right.
right? And so I think in the minds of a lot of people, certainly under conservative governments, there's always the risk of privatization in any sector, whether it's healthcare. I think that has to be on the forefront of thinking. You have to kind of be one step ahead, because here we are, right? She's using her authority to say this is what we're going to do, come hell or high water. It doesn't make any sense. That's the thing. And so I don't know who she's trying to appease, and I don't know what the vilification of Alberta Health Services, love them or hate them, why this is such a battle that she's pushing.
So can I get a little conspiratorial for a second?
You
Oh,
always do. This is
exactly.
why we love you.
Yeah. Hang on. Let me
So
practice
it's-
again. Hang on 1
it-
second. Shut up, Steve. Yeah. Okay. That's good. We're ready. Go for it.
Okay, I think the reason why a lot of this stuff and a lot of these sort of schemes carry on from government to government, in particular across the conservative side, this is based on who's sitting at the top. It feels pretty reasonable to suspect the wheels have been in motion since
Mhm.
Stelmach and through
Mhm.
Redford and then Kenny and all this stuff. So why are they still all playing the exact same game when they're claiming that they are, someone new and different, time for a change? It's because Alberta, same as anywhere, but I think in Alberta it's maybe a little more concentrated. There are influence groups that are extremely influential.
Mhm.
What are the clubs in Calgary? I can never remember the names of them. The one that gives out the white hat and stuff.
Wow.
Is it the Cattlemen's Club, Ranchmen's Club, something like that?
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
But there's that. There's this kooky black hat group that's like trying to influence. There's Take Back Alberta, but there's also the oil industry. There's also like there's big influence groups. There's the Western Standard, right? There's these big influence groups that no matter who is in, they're still pushing the exact same levers. And so this sort of stuff, like, did Jason Kenney set it up? Or is he just part of a far larger thing?
Is he like the eighth guy working on it?
Way bigger than him.
Yeah.
Because like it's never about the individual leader in Alberta in particular. It's about the money.
Yeah. It's disheartening, there's a video I did, I guess a couple of years ago now, called Fix Public Healthcare, and just talked about this creeping privatization, this notion that the big selling point has been like, let's go private, it'll be better. And I've said before as well that there's no more easier sell in the world than selling someone their health. That is like a super easy thing to sell to people. If you want to get better, you want to be out of pain, you want your loved one to be out of pain, you want your kid to be healthy, it's going to cost you this much money. Then you're like, all right, I'm going to find that money. I'm going to do what I can to find that money. And it's so awful and so dark to me, but it's happening in Ontario for sure. It's happening in various other provinces, obviously, as we see. And in the video, anyway, I remember we were talking before we went to air about various people that will use our content to try to make a counterpoint, essentially, to the content. But that's the nicest way I can put it. And
let's leave it there.
Yeah,
very
exactly.
correct. That's very correct.
And when I did that Fix Public Healthcare video, it was dissected by a somewhat professional group, except they weren't very good at making videos. That looked good, but the pacing was terrible. It just wasn't. It didn't sing. It was like you guys could have killed me on this if you'd done it in half the time.
It wasn't zesty. Yeah.
It wasn't zesty, exactly. And
someone more competent could have torn me to shreds.
I could have torn me to shreds. But I remember thinking, like, finding out who they were, and it's like, oh, they're connected to this group, which is connected to a private healthcare company, which is like this is like dastardly. And I think it's one of the worst things in the world. But in the video, I talk about how it's evident when you see these types of changes being made by governments that someone's standing to gain. Someone's standing to make some filthy, filthy lucre from this. And it's the reason you can tell that is because there's nothing similar happening to libraries. No one's trying to get into the library game. No one's like, hey, you know what would make libraries better? Privatizing libraries. Wouldn't that be great?
Big book is trying to make its move.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
I think what you're talking about is a bookstore, sir. But that idea of like healthcare is there to serve the community. The reason it needs to be public, I think, is because there's times when it doesn't make any sense. There's no room for profit. And if there's room for profit, there's room for improvement, is what I think.
So I am a firm believer that if the absence of something could kill you, it shouldn't be withheld for profit. I feel like that's a reasonable baseline. Like if you are standing there holding a piece of food and somebody is starving, you're like, yeah, but I paid $1 for this.
Yeah.
That's all for $1.20. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't work like that. And so I think that's a reasonable baseline to hold as a society.
The one thing about, because when I was just doing a little bit of research just for fun, there is a Covenant Health in the U.S. as well, who runs similar type healthcare.
We can aspire to American style healthcare.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying if they
What
change the sign on the building, and then it doesn't work, they could always bring in American style because the name on the building won't have to change again.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a conspiratorial thought, but anything's possible.
So this two things. First of all, this is not conspiratorial. This is a real thing. If you want to get a sense of just how like many influence groups there are in Alberta, I'll make a video about it someday, but I've covered it before in the past. The busiest post office in Alberta. It's a UPS store.
Yeah.
That like 15 different like Progress for a Better Alberta groups are all run out of PO boxes in
Their
the same place.
businesses. Yeah, exactly.
It's all the same UPS store, and it's like, oh, the grift. But the other thing you talked about, changing signs. There's a dental office not too far from where we live that opened fairly recently as Ohana Dental, a Hawaiian-themed dental office in Regina, Saskatchewan.
Nice.
We're pretty sure they immediately got hit with a copyright because they changed it to Moana Dental.
Oh.
Because it uses most of the same letters. Like, you can very obviously see they just shuffled the letters and bought an M.
Isn't Moana the same, or they just changed the spelling of it?
Oh, I can only feel like another name change is en route.
Right? Yeah, exactly. But it's a huge pie. Healthcare is a huge pie. Just looking really quickly here, Canadian Institute for Health Information, just stating that in 2021 there was $308 billion spent on health, like health spending. So there's crazy amounts of money in it, and there's people who are gunning hard to get their slice of that pie. They're just thinking, all I need is 10% of that. That's all I need is 10%. Well,
and the question I always ask the private healthcare people is, do you think that private profit or private business driving profit will bring that number down?
No, it can't.
No.
It just won't.
Like, does anybody realistically think that's going to happen?
No, but it's the generator to make money. It's not about like fixing anything. It's just to make money for the people that want the money.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the difference in, like, let's say a long-term or continuing care, if it's publicly funded or for profit, the levels of service, like the things that you get, the amount of money you're paying per month, it's ridiculous, right?
And the lived experiences of the staff.
Oh,
of the staff, of the residents. Like, I mean, it's
well, and this is the part that I can't get over. If you are Alberta, you are struggling to recruit healthcare personnel, as is everybody in the world right now.
Sure.
Yeah.
So your plan is to create a industry where they are under constant threat that their employer might just lose control of that hospital. But not only that, if you are not Catholic and maybe you don't support Catholic values or whatever it may be, that narrows your hiring pool for those hospitals too.
Yeah.
Right? There are people who aren't going to want to work in a Catholic facility.
Sure.
And so if I'm a healthcare worker, if I'm a nurse and I'm thinking about moving, like, am I moving to Regina where you get paid less? Am I moving to BC where they're actually working on making the healthcare system better? Am I moving to Alberta where it's just a constant series of threats? It's not a hard call.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do they think they're going to draw people in? They are hiring from the same pool. Any mobile nurse, doctor, whatever it may be, is being like, they are the belle of the ball right now. They get to go wherever they want.
It's a workers' market, and for healthcare, it absolutely is a workers' market.
Do we know
go wherever
if somewhere like Covenant Health or any other faith-based healthcare service, do we know if they have any hiring practices that are restrictive in the same way that the Catholic School Board here in Ontario will work to hire Catholic faith-based teachers over people who are not, by asking questions like, what's your baptism date? All that kind of stuff.
I don't think that happens just because
I'm just curious.
I think, like,
it likely falls under the same constitutional space, but at practice, like, they might not be able to be picky and choosy.
Yeah.
No, because I mean, frontline healthcare is diverse, right? It really is. So to restrict it in that capacity, you're limiting your ability to hire even more. My question, though, is that when you have doctors or nurses or social workers who fall under regulatory bodies and they have criteria under that license to, let's say, advocate to the umpteenth degree, how do you work in a hospital where, let's say, someone wants a procedure done that is not offered there, and your job is to advocate for that patient or resident, but your boss says you can't, your employer says you can't?
Yeah.
Well, and there's another question to be asked here, which is, like, what sort of cost-cutting decisions get made in this process? Like, what if you have, like, I'll give the example of my wife. My wife has MS. There are different treatments available for her.
Mm-hmm.
The one that she's on right now, thank goodness it's through a publicly funded program, costs like upwards of $50,000.
Yeah.
There are other medications that are significantly less effective, significantly worse side effects, but way cheaper.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How quickly do people wind up getting turfed onto those? How long does somebody get, or does it happen before somebody gets told, like, yeah, you've got knee pain, but we're going to call it manageable knee pain
Yeah.
because it's just not a profitable surgery for us, and you can still walk-ish.
Yeah.
So, like, you're fine.
Ish, yeah.
Right? Like, when do these decisions start getting made? And even though you can say they don't get made now, private business.
Yeah, that's exactly
They'll
it.
They'll find a way.
Absolutely. So just to sort of finish off the conversation, what is there? Is there anything we can do to prevent this slippery slide?
We
into
take it to the
hell?
streets, people. We take it to the
Taking it
streets.
to the
That doesn't
Like-
work, Lisa.
It absolutely does
Sure
work.
it does.
Oh, you guys are such hippies.
The only thing that okay, so here's the thing. How are you going to actually get a politician to change their decision? It's either money or public pressure.
Yeah.
Those are really your options.
Yeah. What about
You got money?
what about a
Like,
biting
I
satirical
am not
video?
the man.
Will that do it?
I've been trying.
They do. Hey, it's what got us here, right? It's what we
That's
do.
true. That's true. Exactly.
If it did, we'd already be done.
Maybe this
So-
episode of the podcast is all it took. Maybe that was it.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm
the
gonna-
leadership review. She's like, so I heard these 3 people.
Yeah.
And
Listen,
I've decided to rethink some things.
one of them had some really good points. So did the woman, and then the other guy, he was just nonsense. And
Some dude.
we'll never know which one it was.
I think our best hope for Alberta healthcare, honestly, is for Danielle Smith to be visited by 3 ghosts.
But all of them, the entirety of the UCP needs to fuck all the way off because it's pervasive. It doesn't matter who the head is; it's pervasive.
Do we feel good that they're
Well,
going to get kicked out?
In 2027,
Yeah.
we may have to wex it ourselves because I don't think anybody's going to want to deal with us if by 2027.
Yeah, it's a long time.
I don't know. I mean, yeah,
Right now, it's polling pretty close, which is bananas to me.
Yeah, it is. I agree.
But like, part of it is Nenshi hasn't really had the chance to roll out, or chance you can argue about, but he hasn't really rolled out a lot of policy vision yet.
yeah,
no. There's been no
So-
action in the ledge yet, so
right.
Yeah,
and it's
and that's the other
it's
thing.
way too
Nothing's
early.
sat yet.
It's way too early.
Yeah, but like with Danielle Smith, I think the biggest thing is going to be applying as much public pressure as possible in the run up to the leadership review, making this issue as toxic as imaginably possible.
Yeah,
Right? Because, like, think about the Alberta pension plan. Even though it hasn't stopped, the public backlash has definitely caused them to pump the brakes.
yeah,
mhm.
yeah,
Right?
Mhm.
And they know it's getting increasingly untouchable.
yeah.
If the public backlash hadn't happened, they would have stormed ahead with that and the CPP would be long gone in Alberta.
Yeah. She'd use a notwithstanding, right? That's her go-to. Again, I'm going to make something very clear. I don't necessarily want this to become an Alberta Health Services versus Covenant Health
No, no.
battle because it's not.
Yeah.
It's because I mean, there are workers, it's the workers that I worry about and patients and backlash and stuff like
Sure.
that. But this is 100% a government issue
Yeah,
of trying to create this battle that shouldn't exist because anybody working in healthcare is working for the betterment of whoever they're working with, right? So everybody is trying to make people better.
And anyone who's ever worked through organizational changeover knows how smooth and efficient it all goes.
Well, and healthcare's been stable for so long. Like, this isn't going to throw anything into the toilet. Like,
no.
there's so much, but all of this is just to deflect from a lack of government planning, a waste of money that they've done in spending things here, there, and everywhere to try and fix it. Except listen to fucking frontline staff of what it is that they need. Listen to the doctors, listen to the nurses, listen to the healthcare aides, listen to the patients. Don't call your old buddy and pay him a shit ton of money to say maybe we should get vans and maybe people should be transferred in a van. Like, that'll save healthcare. It's that kind of shit that people
That'll
need to
be
start reading through.
$700,000.
Right,
Make it
thank
out
you
to
for 6
McKinsey.
months' work. Thank you. That's the kind of shit that whether you voted UCP, I don't know why you still would, but if you're voting UCP, think about it because healthcare affects everybody.
To the 3 UCP voters who listen to this
Right?
podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Hey.
First of all, we welcome you.
That's right.
Well, to the people who listen who have, grandparents or parents who listen who vote UCP. Yeah, we just need to start giving our heads a shake. And honestly, we need to get loud.
Yeah.
It's unacceptable.
To the 3 UCP voters who listen to this show, I want to thank you for being paid subscribers. And also in that topic, I want to remind everyone that paid subscribers from now on have access to the full video of the podcast. Of course, everybody else gets the podcast for free elsewhere on audio formats. But if you want a video version, you got to pony up because this thing costs money. You should see our producer.
And then you could see my cat. He's here now.
I was going to say
no,
something.
I know. So was I.
says this, we go.
And I thought, no, Lisa will say it. I was like, oh, God, neither of us should say it. Thank you so much.
Don't be weird. Don't make
Sorry.
it weird.
Thank you so much for watching and or listening. Of course, you can find us at podcastisbroken.ca where you can sign up with your email address and you'll get notified every time there's a new episode. And you can find us on your favorite podcasting platform. For those of you who are listening to the audio version, this will be the end of the show, so we'll see you next week. So thanks so much. People who are watching the video, maybe there's something else. I don't know. Listen, I'm just trying to
Who's
sell.
to say?
We're for profit here. We're absolutely for profit. So
Fucking rights.
That's going to start any day now.
Next, I'm going to unionize. There we go.
all right, let's
I mean, how else are we going to organize against the man?
exactly.
That's
Well, then,
right.
wait a minute. I'm the man. Let's give Owen a cut point. Here we go. There we go. Got a cut point.
Bye.
See you later, guys. Thanks so much for listening.
care yourselves,
Don't
folks.
cut Owen yet. So we're going to do the improvised theme now for those people who are paid subscribers because you paid and you deserve to be punished.
You get the show.
You get the show. Do we have instruments this week?
Nope.
I was just going to do like the opening rhythm from the Indiana Jones theme song.
Oh, okay, cool. I might play this and sing, if that's okay.
Do it.
Okay.
Oh,
Who wants to set a beat? Do you want me to set a beat? No, you should start, Steve.
I got you.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun.
Podcast is broken. Podcast is broken. Podcast is broken. Podcast is broken. I'm singing off key so we don't get in trouble. And we can still use this piece of interpreted music. Podcast is broken. Why did it have to be snakes?
They were going to come right after us for that copyright.
I know.
on
that was.
when we were
I was
right
worried
on
about
it.
that, and then I
So,
decided
it's a good
we
dodge.
should veer. Exactly. So I thanks.
People are going to be throwing their money.
I know
at us.
exactly. If you want to pay,
This
listen.
is the
you can
value you get, people.
go to an email provider, get a couple email addresses, and sign up as many times as you want as a paid subscriber. Thanks so much. We appreciate the support. We'll see you guys next week.
Take care of yourselves, folks.
Bye.